Good evening, Dr. Anurag.
Good evening, Deepika. How are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Dr. Anurag, I'm just going to welcome everybody and introduce you before we begin the conversation. I'm Deepika Mahidhara and welcome you guys back to another conversation as part of Within Arm's Reach. The aim which is to spread cheer and not fear, and to share and not to scare. Also gives me the opportunity to do one of the things I love doing, which is to have conversations through which I believe we can all expand our collective reach in terms of information, in terms of learning, growth, and generally spreading positive energy, staying engaged and inspired during this time. Today, I have with me Dr. Anurag Srivastava. He is a psychiatrist and a psychoanalytical psychotherapist. So this means I also took a while to understand what it means. Dr. Anurag will explain, but first let me tell you what it means. It means that he has an MD in psychiatry. He passed out as he came first in Gujarat University in his class, and he passed out with a distinction from a 3-year program from another college in Gujarat called Antarnag, where he studied psychoanalytical psychotherapy, which is the Freudian way of psychotherapy. And he has a total of 20. I can see Dr. Anurag nodding away. He has 22 years of experience in both teaching and therapy. And it is his area of passion to do therapy with adults, particularly with couples. And he enjoys teaching and general psychiatry. If I get into the number of journals he's written and the things he's presented at conferences across the world, they will all bounce off our heads. So I won't even get started. You'll all know how rich his experience is once we start chatting with him. Also, he's got a great sense of humor. So ask your questions. Don't be surprised if he quotes from films and Shairi and old Hindi songs and also Star Wars. Dr. Anurag, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Deepika. It's wonderful to see you again.
Yes. So, Dr. Anurag, since you specialize in marital therapy, and there are a lot of people who are interested, everybody wants to be loved, in love, and feel a sense of belonging. And there are a lot of people who send me messages saying, why don't you do something on relationships? And I thought that was a jolly good idea to talk about relationships with a specialist. But before that, since you have such a broad area, can you tell us what, according to you, is mental health? Like, when can you tell when a person is mentally healthy and when not? I just wanted to start with that generic question.
Right. So, psychiatrists are probably the wrong people to ask this question because, we are trained in the medical model, and the medical model is about illness.
Mm-hmm.
So we can tell what is wrong with people, when it is wrong, and what to do about it. Well, not all the time. We can't tell people what to do about it all the time. Sometimes we just have to tell them that we can't do anything about it. So, but it's very difficult to go the other way and say that you're all right. You're all right. So for example, if somebody asks that, can you give me a certificate of mental wellness? We are unlikely to be able to say that you are mentally well. We are likely to say the other way, like go the other way and say that there is no evidence of any psychiatric disorder in this person. A double negative.
Okay.
There is no evidence of a disorder, and therefore you are healthy. But the World Health Organization has actually defined health, in which mental health is also included, and it says that health is not merely the absence of a disease or a disorder. It's a state of complete physical, mental, emotional, and some people add spiritual well-being. So health is a state of feeling good, of feeling well, of feeling reasonably happy and satisfied with ourselves, and the same thing can be applied to mental health as well.
Okay, thank you. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, there are words that, when we look at agony aunt columns or when we read on relationships, there are words used like a toxic relationship versus a healthy relationship. So, I mean, how do you know what is a toxic relationship and what is healthy? Because there's also, when there's two people involved, there's likely to be some amount of disagreement. Two people are different, so there's likely to be some amount of strife in every relationship, romantic and otherwise. So, I mean, how do you know when a relationship is getting toxic?
So this is a very subjective thing. I think that only the person who is there in the relationship can really say whether the relationship is toxic for them or not.
Okay.
So other people shouldn't be able to say for somebody else that this is a toxic relationship. At best, it is their opinion.
Okay.
It is their opinion that if I were in that relationship, I would consider it to be a toxic relationship.
Okay.
So what is a toxic relationship is very subjective. So when should, so that relationship basically should be something which is bringing much more stress and tension and difficulties in your life than otherwise. So if a relationship is a source of greater comfort and love and care and affection and belonging and solace, then that's a healthy relationship. They don't exist, of course. And all and all relationships which are otherwise, where, so it's a question of that subjective feeling that if I feel that that relationship is not adding value to my life, is adding more stress to my life and more discomfort, or it's in any way abusive for me, then those relationships would be toxic. So one person may see one relationship as toxic and the other partner may not see it as toxic. So it can be very subjective. And another person, you may have a close friend or a confidant who says that oh, your relationship is toxic, or the other way, that no, what's wrong with your relationship? But actually other people can't understand that. And so there used to be that jingle about a toffee in that used to say that melody khao khud jan jao. So toxicity, melody khao khud jan jao. Yeah. So the toxicity of a relationship or the health of a relationship is a subjective feeling. And if you feel that the relationship is toxic, that it is causing me harm, that it is taking away more than it is giving me, and I feel very uncomfortable with it, then it is toxic.
But then, Dr. Anurag, I mean, there are people who go on living in relationships, despite a lot of their freedom being taken away. There could even be violence. They could be constantly put down, demeaned in so many ways, right? So are you saying that if they don't think that it's toxic, then nobody else ought to pull them out of it?
Well, so this is much more complicated. Well, I don't think that we can pull people out of relationships if they don't want to be pulled anyway.
Okay.
It's rather difficult to do that. It's difficult enough to pull people out of relationships they want to exit as it themselves. And so if somebody doesn't want to be pulled out of a relationship unless they are minors, it's very, very difficult for us to be able to do that. But you see, why people stay in relationships is a very complicated and multi-layered thing. People, it's not so simple that a person realizes that I'm in a toxic relationship and that's it, I'm going to walk out. So it starts very early, since our childhood. So I always say that, for example, in our country, marriage is like death. It's universal. It's inevitable.
Okay.
And for a large part, we have made it irreversible also. So you see, we are always told in direct and indirect ways that staying married is good and getting divorced is bad.
Right.
I wonder if you have been on the outer ring road here in Hyderabad anytime soon. So they have sometimes they have those captions and all displayed on those screens. So one of them says, "Stay married, divorce speed." Divorce speed. So
Right.
so in many subtle ways and not so subtle ways, we are given the impression from the very beginning that
Yeah.
it is
Okay.
right to be married and stay married. We have a astonishingly and disappointingly high percentage of people who are married. So in our
Dr.
country, for
if any what are those called, self-appointed custodians of our Indian culture are on this, they are going to be so livid after
yeah,
hearing this.
I'm fair game for that, and I would love to have a discussion with them about that. You know,
Yeah.
so we, at the if you look at the peak age at which women are married, that is roughly between 20 and 35. And the percentage of women who in that age group who are married in our country is 94%. Yeah, the
Ouch.
other
Okay.
6% are
Yeah.
divorced or widowed or
Suddenly.
something.
Okay.
Yeah, it's shocking, isn't it? And if you look at, say, some other countries, like you look at Sweden, for example. You don't want to look at Sweden right now, but when the corona thing is over, if you look at Sweden,
Yeah.
then they have almost 46 or 47% of people who are single. So one of the things is that very early on, we are given subtle and not so subtle hints that one has to get married.
Mm.
And even more importantly, we have to stay married.
Mm.
So that is something that even if people don't consciously believe in it, so intellectually, a lot of people would say that I don't believe that. But we should not underestimate the power that our emotions have on our conscious thinking.
Okay.
Unless the emotion matches that thinking, we will not agree with that behavior. So one example of that is cigarette smoking causes cancer. It is written on every single cigarette pack with horrific
Mm.
pictures of cancer on the things. How many people pick up the pack and look at that warning and then throw it down in horror and say, okay, I'm quitting smoking? That's 5%.
Nobody.
Spontaneous quick rate is 4. So that means that unless that emotion is connected with that intellectual knowledge, it doesn't bring about change in behavior. So even though a lot of people may say that I know that, oh, that is nonsense, we should only stay in marriage if the marriage is good, but there is a deep emotion which has been embedded in us that, like, this is not the right thing. Then there are many other considerations. Unfortunately, many women are impoverished. They don't have an education. They cannot support themselves. We have this very strange thing that now this is your husband's house is your house, and many parents are not supportive of their children coming back to them from abusive relationships. They try to keep pushing them back into toxic relationships, like trying to prod a sick horse to its feet, and saying that
Yes.
no, 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 you should try to work it out. And I have seen countless educated, intelligent, educated, working women staying in abusive relationships. And then there's the question of the children.
Right.
So in our country, so there was this comedian who described, he said that, have you seen the Indian railway tracks? So they are all over the place, right? And
Yeah.
our marriages are like that. Our marriages are like that, he said. We are
Okay.
doomed to run together. We'll never meet. We'll be running parallel to each other, living parallel lives, but we'll never meet. And the children are those sleepers which bind them together. So even if the rails want to go their separate ways, they will not be allowed to do that. So you see, why people stay in toxic relationships are very complicated relationship questions. There is a lot of personal, emotional factors. There's a lot of societal factors, and there are a lot of practical difficulties, including money and children, which is why a lot of people may stay in toxic relationships.
Okay. Dr. Anurag, you shared some statistics which basically show that a lot more women in India are married versus women in Sweden. And
Yes,
possibly a lot more women in India are married versus a lot more women in many other parts of the Western world as well, right? It's quite possible.
yes, yes, yes.
So having worked with couples in therapy for 22 years now, I mean, do you
Hey,
think
that's not true. Okay, that makes me feel older than I am.
I mean, do you think marriage and relationships are overrated? what is the value addition? I mean, see, human beings yearn to be loved. So, I mean, there's got to be some value addition from being in a relationship. I mean, I'm sure there are some happy people and there are some unhappy people. Um, we're often told that we know that marriage is a societal construct, but we are told that human beings are animals that need companionship, that we are social animals, that we need companionship. I mean, how far is this true? And I mean, what is your general take on this? Do
Okay. So
relationships and
first of
marriage
all,
add value?
yes, um, good relationships add value.
Okay.
See, we should not equate marriages and relationships, because many marriages do not have good relationships. Many
Okay.
marriages comprise of people living parallel lives under the same roof,
Uh-huh.
and they are not happy with each other. And therefore, marriage is going to add value to life is difficult to say. A
Okay.
good relationship will add value to life. There's no doubt about that. Companionship and relationships, as being the single most important component of human happiness, has actually been demonstrated, and that you can find a TED talk on this also.
Okay.
There is a very long running study from Harvard.
Uh-huh.
I think it has run for more than 75 years now. It has had
Okay.
5 directors, because most of the directors are, like senior people and all, and they pass away and the study is ongoing. So they've had 5 directors. And in that guy, the current director, I've forgotten his name, but if you look at Harvard study on the secret of human happiness, and the
Okay.
longest running
Mm-hmm.
experiment, that gentleman pointed out
Mm-hmm.
that if you want a single line takeaway from that study, that what contributes the most to human happiness, the answer is companionship.
Wow. Okay.
Good human relations add the most value to human life. But we can't equate good relations with marriages all the time. Just being married doesn't mean that you are going to have a good relationship, and just being married doesn't mean that it's going to add value to your life. You're definitely going to take some value away from your bank balance.
Okay, I just like to let everybody know that Dr. Anurag is a happily married man. Uh, he's married to a surgeon.
Several times happily married.
To
No,
the
no, just
same
kidding. I'm
woman.
just kidding.
And he has two lovely girls from the marriage. Uh, so yeah, I just wanted to let everybody know that. I felt it would be more comforting. So,
Yeah.
um, Dr. Anurag,
No, actually,
yeah.
Deepika, my wife has told me
Uh-huh.
that I have her permission to feel absolutely free to say anything in this. I'm totally free.
That is so
I
cool.
can say anything about it. Yeah, she gave me permission for that. I don't have to. I'm a free man. Yeah.
Man, good to
Yeah.
know.
You were
So you're
saying
a
something.
happily married man. Yeah. Um,
Hmm.
so I was saying that a lot of people these days, even in India, though the percentage is small, right? There are a lot of people, now that we've established that good relationships are amongst the top causes for happiness amongst human beings. In
Yeah.
today's scenario, even in
Means
India, and
except for the iPhone, except for
sorry,
the new iPhone. Except for the new iPhone. Sorry, I
okay,
forgot to mention that.
all right.
Hmm.
Um, the other day I was staying in a hostel in Bangalore. I was staying with a Canadian, a girl from the UK, um, a girl from China, and there were two of us girls from India. And one of the things, now, of course, this is a very small group, but one of the things that, everybody said, especially the girl in the UK and Canada, is that so many women in their 30s, particularly, so many people in general in their 30s and 40s today are single. So many more. than there were in the day of our, parents and grandparents, or even people who are in their 50s or 60s today, saw far less people being single than we do today in India, in the cities especially, right? I mean, and the common notion is that people have become less tolerant and therefore relationships don't survive. Would you like to comment on that? Would you be able to comment on that? I mean, is that the reason?
Well, it's difficult for me to say that they have become more tolerant because
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have a set in which I can look at older people and say that they are more tolerant than younger people just because of the generation,
Mm-hmm.
because of
Mm-hmm.
the times. I think that people become more tolerant as they age. So if you
Okay.
talk to people who were married in their 50s and 60s, well, that's little too old, but say 70s and 80s, and compare with people who were married, say, in the last 20 years, those
Mm.
people are older in age and therefore likely to be more mature in their views, or I don't want to say that in a condescending way, means
Mm.
more measured or probably a little tempered down in their emotions. So I can't really say whether the generation shift has made that people are less tolerant. I don't think so. I don't think so. I think
Mm-hmm.
what has happened, the single most important reason for more people being single is simply because they can afford to.
Okay.
Many people are now, much more people are educated, having jobs, and willing to pursue their own thing. So dependent on the old family system. The old hierarchies are slowly breaking down. The joint families are not so common these days, and the nuclear families are more. And so people don't have that kind of pressure on them all the time. But I think that education and financial independence and a greater willingness to take chance and to have, lead your life the way you want to, those are important factors in more people being single these days.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Shobhana Jayaraman, she has a question. She said, not a
Yes.
question actually. She's just making a comment. She said people temper down their emotions with age. Doesn't seem like a norm.
No,
Would you like to
means
comment on
it
that?
will always, yeah, it doesn't mean that everybody will. There are some people who will actually get more irritable, and it depends on how satisfied and how happy they have been with their lives, what their temperament has been. But if
Right.
you take in general, you take a guy who is how he is or she is at 20,
Hmm.
they are more likely to be not so impulsive, more measured, not so reactive, and be able to understand things better and accept things much better in that. So, to give the Star Wars reference, so that in one of the recent ones, so there is this guy Finn, and he is very impulsive and he is very scared of the First Order, and Han Solo is not is obviously not that scared because he's fought so many battles. And in one of them, in one of the scenes, that guy is saying that I'm not going to stay and try to fight the First Order because we're all going to be destroyed, and I'm going to go. I'm quitting. And that young girl, Ray, she's all fired up that how can you quit this fight, and like how can you walk away, and this is the cause and all. And Han Solo doesn't say anything. And when that kid says that, no, Finn says, I'm going to leave. So Han Solo just actually, so he showed him the gun. The Finn showed the gun which Han Solo had given him. That do I need to give this back? And Han sort of said, keep it, kid. And he didn't react to that at all. You see, is it a norm? No, it's not a norm. But in general, if you look at a bunch of people, how impulsive or how passionate or how forceful they were when they were in their 20s, and you look at them when they are in their 60s, you're likely to see a tempering down. It's not a norm, however. I agree with that.
Right. Also, um, so there are so many questions, and also the audience, please start asking your questions. I'm continuing because I haven't seen anything from anybody so far. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, I have a bunch of questions, but something just came to me from what you said in the beginning when we were talking about mental health. You said that there are some cases in which cure is not, in which you cannot help people, even if they're mentally
Yeah.
ill. What are those cases, if I may ask?
So basically, mental illness, there are three major disorders in mental illness: schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and major depressive disorder, which is severe with psychotic
Sorry?
features, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Major
Okay.
depressive disorder, which
Right.
is very severe depressions.
Right.
See, depressions in general are not, I don't consider them to be mental illnesses. See, we all get depressed. I get depressed, you get depressed, we all get depressed. But some people may have such a severity and chronicity of depression that it can be considered to be a mental illness. So
Mm-hmm.
if you look at people with the most severe disorder, schizophrenia, for example, if you follow people throughout their lives, what you'll roughly find is that one third of people are well, one third of people are well but have multiple relapses, and
Mm-hmm.
one third of people are not well at all. They may have deteriorating courses, or they may never regain any degree of their previous functioning. So there will be no matter what you do, roughly 20 to 30% of people with schizophrenia will never be well. So there
Okay.
are conditions in which even if we do our best, we treat people, they still are not well. You look at bipolar disorder, bipolar disorder. So the average number of episodes that a person is likely to have in their lifetime ranges from 9 to 20.
Okay.
I always say to my colleagues that when we say, like, it sounds like a joke when we say that I've been treating this guy for 20 years. If we've been treating them for 20 years, they should be well, right? But we are seeing them for 20 years, and they have multiple relapses. In fact, there was a wise psychiatrist from Tamil Nadu called Venkoba Rao. In those countries, he's no more now, but he was a very wise and like one of the doyens of psychiatry. And one day he said in a conference that I call it the sofa syndrome, SOFA, sofa syndrome. Same old faces again and again. We see people come to us for years on end, and so are we able to cure them? No. Many of them have multiple relapses. But then I'm talking about the serious mental illnesses, the schizophrenias and the bipolar disorders. The vast majority of conditions which people suffer from, the anxieties and the depressions and the phobias and the sleeplessness and those things, a lot of them we can really help people, and they become well, and they lead normal, happy, productive lives. So the vast majority of this we can help, but there are some very serious illnesses in which no matter what you do, a I would say a quarter of those people don't become well.
Okay. And uh, is it possible for these people to have to be in relationships? I mean, um, I mean, do you know patients with these conditions who are in marriages or relationships and actually
Yes, yes,
benefiting to
yes.
some extent? Okay, that's
Okay.
wonderful.
See, a good relationship will benefit anybody. It
Right,
doesn't benefit the disorder. They
right,
will benefit people like they benefit people without the condition also. So all of
right.
us would benefit from better relationships, and so will people who are suffering from disorders. The relationship is not going to have a direct impact on the disorder. Do I know people with these serious conditions who have gotten married? Sure. As I told you, marriage is inevitable in our country. The vast majority of people suffering from major disorders also get married. They do get married. The
Okay,
problem arises when people are having a rocky course in their disorder.
okay,
They suffer multiple relapses, and then that is very difficult for the relationship in general. That can cause
right.
a lot of problems and can lead to divorces and separations and abandonments. That can happen.
I see. Okay, okay. Um, Dr. Anurag, coming back to a more generic question, I of course had one question on abuse, but before that, um, even though so many people are choosing to be single, many of these single people from time to time will try to be in relationships. And you also said yourself that, many people who are, independent, intelligent, otherwise, seemingly smart people will stay in relationships that are possibly abusive. Why?
Okay, so let me come to the second part first. So there you see, especially when a relationship is young and it starts afresh, there's a lot of attraction that relationship has. And the feeling of starting a new relationship can be very heady. And that is something, people they want that feeling, and they're willing to take some amount of conflict and fights and these things in order to have that feeling. Because people who are fighting also, they also have their good moments. If somebody doesn't have any good moments and only fighting, then that relationship won't last. So people are likely to tolerate a fair amount of conflict in order to keep the great feeling which comes from relationships going. That is one thing. And I think that, I'm happy that we are slowly moving away from this thing that janam ka saath kind of thing. That if I fallen in love with somebody, we fall in love only once, and pehla pyar, and that is the one which these things don't work out in real life. I think that we should all approach relationships with an open mind, and we should definitely try our best to make relationships work. But if relationships are not working, then we shouldn't trap ourselves with these ideas that no, we can't get out of a relationship, and once I've made a commitment, it's for life. And it shouldn't be like that. How can we predict how things are going to go? We can't predict what's going to happen 15 days from now. Right. We can't predict what's going to happen in the next 50 days. So we shouldn't make those promises. We might make those promises in the flush of love and the heady feeling which is there, which is fine. But we shouldn't hold ourselves or other people to those promises. That no, once we are committed to this, if a relationship is not going well, why suffer and torture? It doesn't mean that you are a bad person or the other person is a bad person. It might mean that you are just not compatible together. You should definitely try to work things out. You should try to smoothen things out, iron things out, talk, discuss those things to make those things better. And in many cases, it does get better. But there can be many people who, after trying so hard, also can't make it better. And then why have to suffer? You might actually find happiness with somebody else. You may or may not. There's no guarantee on this. But I think that we should not have that kind of thing, that fixicity, that we have committed to a 40-year relationship in the first 40 days of meeting somebody. In my experience also, a lot of young people, I see them coming up and saying that I just want to try out different relationships. I'm not looking to settle down in any of them. We should definitely have more freedom, but we should also have the safety. So we don't want a position where our girls, and generally it is the girls who are in danger or being assaulted or physically and mentally harassed, those kind of things. For that we need, well, first of all, we need tough laws, but our laws are tough. We need good implementations of the laws, but no law is going to provide safety. What provides safety is mindset. What provides safety is mindset. Now you see, if you look at generally what happens in more strict places and all that the guys and the girls will not be allowed to mix. Or initially when they are very small, it's all right. But once they start to mature, then we try to keep a distance, and the boys should not mingle with the girls. The thing is that if you don't allow children to mix and make friends and grow up and be friends, how do we expect respect to grow for each other?
Right.
If you keep boys in a cloistered group and girls in a cloistered group, they see each other as aliens. They don't have that kind of empathy. It doesn't have that kind of respect for each other. So I think that it is very important for us to be able to allow people to be able to meet other people, to have experiences. But on the other hand, we must also try to ensure that the safety is there. We must focus our attention on not letting some of the bad consequences of this freedom happen, like We don't want teenage pregnancies. We don't want sexually transmitted diseases to spread. We want people to be aware of their health, and those kind of things is the important thing.
Right. So, Dr. Anurag, how can we choose better partners for ourselves? How can we increase our success rate at finding a good partner? And what can we do to be happy in our relationships?
Very well. Let me first. So first, I think that the best thing to be able to find a good partner for ourselves is to have the maximum amount of time to get to know the other person well. A lot of people would look at the physical appearance of the person, and that becomes the most important thing for them. And physical appearance
Right.
is important for the attraction and the liking. It is an important part. You need to be attracted to that person. But the thing is that it is given a lot more importance than it should be.
Okay.
The more important thing is that whether the two people are compatible, they have similar goals, ideals, dreams, they have similar mindsets, thinking, ideologies, they have the same kind of qualities that they are looking for in each other. Those things are more important than physically. So you need to have time to understand the other person. That is the single most important thing in choosing good partners for ourselves. How to have a good relationships? Okay, so that is a very complicated question, but I will give you, see, from all these years that I have worked with so many people, more than 500 couples, I would say that the gist is this. Of course, this doesn't mean this is the one line answer for everything and all that. It's not like that. But if you want a one line thing, if you want me to compress the most important thing that I have learned from the people I have worked with, is this.
Right.
Not the other way around. It's not that I have been giving them the yeah. I have learned this over a period of time. Is that the vast majority of conflicts are because we are constantly trying to win our point and trying to convince the other person of the correctness of our point of view and the incorrectness of theirs. We want the other person to change. We want the other person to become the kind of person we would want them to be, whom we have imagined them to be, whom we think they should be. The other person has his own characteristics, his own personalities, his own viewpoints, and they don't accept all the things which are projected onto them, and they behave differently from what you would want them to behave. The more you know of a person, the more of the real picture you know and less of the projection which is happening. So you understand a person more, your projections, you say that, okay, I wanted him to be like this, but he's not like that. She would be like this, but she's not like that. You get a more realistic picture the longer you know them. And the less the projection, the less the disappointment. Because when we have a small amount of reality, a large amount of projection, we get disappointed all that much more, and so that causes stress. So I would say that the most important thing in relationships is learning. First of all, it would be very nice if you have had an opportunity to know the person a little before you get married to them. Then you must work on accepting the person as is, where is, and whatever there is. Rather than constantly be in strife that why don't you change? When will you change? When will you become better? When will you understand this? This is a recipe for a constant battle in life. The more we understand ourselves, the better it becomes for the relationship, and we learn to avoid those things which we know are going to be problematic things. I give an example, if you'll permit me, an example which I give in my own life and all. So I am the guy who will not fix anything around the house. Like if the tube light is gone, it is gone forever. Now, so the electrician and the plumbers are forever in my house, working and those things. So there was one incident in which I was sitting at the dining table and having a cup of tea, I think, and all. And the electrician was up on a ladder and he was fixing something. And my wife told him, Subbarao, the tube light also has to be changed. So that fellow looked down from his ladder at me and gave me a filthy look that, you lazy bugger, you can't even fix a tube light. So I looked at him, then I looked back at my tea and I continued with my tea and all that. So my wife caught that look and she smiled and she said, "Sir ke bas ki baat nahi hai ye sab cheezein. He can't do all of this." you see, it must be infuriating for her also and for him also that this lazy bugger, he won't even change a tube light. The thing is that you can turn this into a constant strife that why can't you do this? Why can't you change this? It should have, everybody does that. Is it such a big deal? Or you can accept that and not get a heartburn every time the other person. A lot of times people tell me that, look at how he's behaving, sir. Look at how she is talking to me. Look at how he's saying this. I tell them that if you waste all your time trying to get him to understand and agree to your point of view, you are setting the stage for an interminable conflict. And you can convert it into a chronic fight, or you can accept it and then you can take the appropriate option. There's another example I give. Suppose you are driving on Tank Bund. You're driving on the road, which is the side of, because here the side is the right side and the right side is the wrong side, right? So you're driving on the left side of the road and you're going at 40 kilometers an hour. And there's one guy who jumps the double line in the middle, which says no overtaking. He jumps the double line and is barreling down the wrong side of the road at 90 kilometers an hour. Now, what are you going to do? Are you going to say that I am right? I'm not going to move. I'm going to let him crash into me? No.
Okay. Yeah.
No. You might feel you are right about a lot of things in your relationships, but right and wrong are a point of view. One man's freedom fighter is a terrorist. We must respect the differences that people have, and the more we accept these differences, the more likely we are to get rid of that conflict and lead a happier life.
Okay. That was a very detailed response, also very helpful. And I can, as a, you know, I'm in my mid-30s, and I can see a lot of what you're saying has, you know, played out in my life, and I can see a lot of our viewers have responded, sort of high-fiving you on that response, and smiling about
I hope
it.
that very detailed is not code for boring, right?
I certainly benefited from it, and I hope they have. I'm sure they would have said so. So coming back, so relating this, now you said that, you know, we should have enough time to get to know the person, right? While dating in India, ideally speaking. Now, while dating in India,
ideally speaking, and enough time is also very difficult to define. Enough time is difficult to define.
Right.
It will be different for different people. Generally, it is around 27 to 30 years.
Dr. Anurag.
okay, just
okay, so then, I mean, like, I'll have to ask you, so, you know, are you suggesting that maybe we should encourage people to live in with each other before they marry? And I also have a question. Now, the thing is, like you said, in the beginning of a relationship, right? Part of the elements that add to the headiness of a new relationship, the physical attraction, the sex is definitely one of them. Correct? Is that correct? Now,
yes.
Sex is also a way of bonding, right?
Yes.
That's also a fair assumption to make. So the thing is that within the dating culture, you know, you're experimenting with different people, and you could, before you know it, you could be attached to any one of them. Some you may not get attached to, something might put you off very obviously, or, you know, there may be something that's not really going beyond a certain point. But sometimes you could be attracted to somebody with who the relationship is eventually not working out. So, I mean, does the sex sort of confuse one's judgment sometimes? I mean,
I think
it has happened to me.
Sex can be an important factor. Sex can be an important factor in the initial relationship. I think very few people would say that that is the factor which will allow them to continue a relationship if other things are not working a few months or years down the line. That rarely will happen. That nobody will stay in a relationship if other things are not good just because the physical relationship is very good. That is, I haven't found that to happen very often. So I think that should we, and you asked whether we should encourage people. So see, I think, Deepika, that we are nobody to encourage or discourage people from doing this. It's a very personal decision that people should take. It's their own thing. It's their own choice. But definitely, I think that we should not be the ones who should be pushing always that let us get married with the minimal amount of information. Generally, the information that we look at is too superficial, and it generally is not very relevant to compatibility. So the family is very good, there's an IAS officer. These things have no value in the quality of the relationship that the young couple is going to have, or that he is very well settled, he's got a good job, he's a neurologist, or he's a architect with a, he's got a lot of bank balance. These things have very little things to add to relationships. I think that the compatibility that two people have, and as I said, it's very difficult to say what is a good amount of time, but that compatibility is very important.
Okay. But have you not found cases where people get attached to each other even though they're not good for each other? It's almost like an addiction of sorts, where you feel you cannot do without this person, but even as you are
doesn't last very long.
Doesn't last very long. Eventually somebody takes the fall out. Okay. So what you're saying is spend enough time to know as much as you possibly can about the person. Why I asked about living in is, now when you're dating also, you are meeting the person outside of their comfort zone, outside of their home and their personal space, right? So you go out to a restaurant, you go out to films, even if you go to each other's houses, you're hanging out with each other for a day or two at best, or you go on a bit of a holiday together. But when you actually start living with a person, and let's say, given the expectation in India, even now in many families, you may start suddenly living not only with the person, but also his mother and father and, brother or sister and grandparents, right? So how, what has been your observation in terms of, how easy or difficult is it to really make the assessment based just on meeting this person?
It is very difficult.
Okay.
It's very difficult. Yeah. I think there's a question here. Is that, am I reading that right? Or
yeah, there is a question
there's somebody who's asked a
when
question.
Acceptance of others is forward factor, when one loses him or herself? I didn't, Vikramaditya, thank you for your question.
I don't know what is forward factor. I don't understand what is forward factor, but I'll say, but I'll say that about loses himself or herself, that I think that these two hand in hand. When we accept another person, it doesn't mean that we are changing any part of our identity. We are who we are. We just accept the other person as they are. So for example, if I say that my boss is a very short-tempered person. Now, if I accept that, what will happen is that when he does lose his temper and all, it helps me to cope with it better. It doesn't any part of my personality or my identity, or I have been subservient to that, but it helps me to cope with that person, to live with that person, to have a better relationship with that person, provided I am able to understand and accept it and not get angry about the same thing over and over again. So that is how I think it can help us without us losing our own identity in that.
Okay. So Vikramaditya
taking forward a relationship.
Taking forward a relationship by accepting the opposite one when there is a sense of emptiness with oneself. Oh, that's a very pertinent question.
So that sense of emptiness, I think that is what was being talked about. So that sense of emptiness, I think that is something which we have to work with individually. We have to understand why we feel that way. Good relationships can help to fill that sense of emptiness. But that is basically something which we should work on ourselves to see why we feel that way. There can be many reasons which might not have anything to do with the relationship. It is likely to do a lot with who we are.
Right.
That.
Okay. All right. So in a nutshell, there's no perfect equation for a great relationship.
No.
One must spend as much time as possible trying to get to know the other person before sort of investing
Yes.
oneself and committing to anything long term. Also, it's important to not try to have to win over an argument, not to try to change the other person, because that's a recipe for disaster and constant sort of
Yes,
strife.
we should focus more on accepting
And
and understanding the person rather than trying to get them to be the kind of people we would want them to be. You see, when we get into relationships as adults,
but
that package is already wrapped.
right,
You don't get to undo the
right.
package and say, I want this part and I don't want that part. That package is already wrapped. That
You
personality is
accept
already
the
set.
package.
So you have to accept the whole package. You should understand that, okay, these are the things which are problematic and how to avoid them. And these are the things which, which are working for me, and not work on that. I want to get rid of this part of your personality. Sometimes the same trait can be double-edged. So suppose you've got a person you've got a generous wife or a generous husband, and you might find that to be a wonderful quality. Except when one day you found out that one of his friends came up and read him a sob story and he gave away 2 lakhs and said, I gave up, I'm a generous person. So the same generosity, which was looking like a peacock, now starts to look like a vulture.
Right. Right.
So we have to understand that many things which we are angry about, our partners, they look good in one situation but not in another. So the same kind that the person, is very spontaneous, very free, he will just decide something on the spur of the moment and go, and it's so exciting and it's so fun. 20 or 30 years later, it may look reckless to us.
Right.
So that this is reckless behavior. You see, there are two sides to a coin. Many times we should understand that the same property of our partner, which is endearing in one circumstance,
Right.
is very irritating in another.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So
that flexibility is important.
So I just, on the point of not expecting a person to change, right? Let's say you got married and you found out that this guy is super violent, or this girl is constantly maybe the girl is violent, or whatever, something is wrong, somebody has an alcohol problem, or somebody else has a problem where they're unable to stop being with other women or men, even whilst in a marriage. So are you saying that it's futile to try and change them? I mean, what is the solution in such a case?
No, what we should definitely do is that we should first try to talk things over, point out the things which are different. And a lot of people may actually say that, okay, I didn't understand, or I understand that this is a problem for you. We should always communicate.
Right.
We should always put our idea on the table, but whether that person will pick up that idea and accept that idea, trying to force that causes most of the conflicts. We should definitely say what it is. So in a lot of cases, when we tell people about our concerns, and a lot of people will understand and they will want to change. If they want to change, they will change those things. And I think that what we should also, if that doesn't work, we should definitely try to seek professional help in that. But if the relationship doesn't improve with that, and it's a violent, abusive relationship, absolutely we shouldn't stay in a violent, abusive relationship if our attempts to fix it haven't been working.
Okay. All right. Okay, so here there are two questions.
Sure.
One is, my friend who has no guardians alive. Oh, it's by the same person. He is lost in between getting married and making a career due to pressure from his relatives. And Vikramaditya says, I can sense that he is getting depressed. How to counsel or approach this situation?
Okay. So first of all, what I would want to know is whether the person wants to get married or he is considering marriage because of the pressure from the relatives. So if a person doesn't want to get married, then I think it is futile to try to force a person to reluctant. Marriage is relationships are difficult enough without having reluctant participants added to it. So if a person isn't sure that he wants to get married or she doesn't want to get married, they shouldn't be forced. At best, if the relatives are concerned or we are concerned, we can talk to them about it. That why aren't you interested? What's the problem? And we can talk to them about it, but we shouldn't force people. That is one thing. And if a person wants to get married, then it's a question of putting in the balance. You know, like if you have 5 glasses of water, 5 glasses, and you have a jug of water and you fill 2 glasses full, then you won't have any glasses left for the other 3.
Right.
Any water left for the other 3.
Right.
So you have to put enough water in all the glasses of your life. So work and family and relaxation and enjoyment and hobbies and doing the things which are important, we should try to equally distribute. If I fill all the water I have got in just 2 of the glasses, then my other 3 glasses will have no water in it. So I would rather want to have a balance in that. So if a person is willing to get married and is worried about balancing work and career, that everybody faces. And I think that it's a personal question of how you want to balance it.
Okay. All right. Are there any other questions? So I think we've covered generically mental health, and we've covered, what are some ways in which we can sort of choose better partners for ourselves. When I say better, I mean the right fit for us. And also, what the recourse could be if one feels that certain things in a person need to be changed, and if we feel that they are harmful to us. Yeah, I hope, Vikramaditya, has your question been answered to your satisfaction?
I think that it says, okay, thank you.
Yes, he says
it's
thank
me,
you.
Vikramaditya.
Yeah. Okay. So, Dr. Anurag, I think, this is a good place to sort of close this conversation.
Sure.
Just before that, I mean, are there any suggestions from any of the viewers on, any other topics around mental health that you guys would be keen to talk about? Yesterday, Dr. Anurag, there were a lot of questions. Hi, Nareen. There were a lot of questions about depression. So maybe we can, do another session separately about depression.
Totally.
If there are people, so today we talked about relationships, and I will summarize points from our conversation, Dr. Anurag, and share them with you before I put them up on Instagram. Just some of the key points that you've shared for those who couldn't make it at this time. The video will be on my stories for the next 24 hours for anybody who's interested in watching. We talked a lot about relationships, about marriage, about global statistics of marriage, about, what you should do to make sure that you find a partner best suited to yourself. What are some of the things that you can do, though there's no 100% guarantee, and what you can do to be happier with the partners that you have chosen. So I'll put up some of the key points. You can also listen to the conversation. Thank you so much, Dr. Anurag.
Thank you very much. And I want to tell everybody that I joined Instagram 2 days ago because of Deepika, and haven't been on the social media that much. And I think it's great fun. So thank you, and thank giving me an opportunity to talk with so many friends here. And I hope to see you again sometime.
Yes, Dr. Anurag, definitely. Thank you all for joining us. Take care.
Thank you.